how to approach your marketing the right way. So, what is that all about? The goal of today is all about demystifying digital marketing. There's all kinds of things there. Digital marketing as a phrase is actually only been a thing that's been around for about 15 years. When I set up around that time, I didn't call myself a digital marketing consultant, I just called myself a marketing consultant, and it just became a thing because digital is such a huge thing. Now, some of the most common things that I hear people say when I'm speaking to them is, there's so many marketing methods, we don't know which one's right for us. We don't know what's working and what isn't. We just want results, right? Because if you're working with a marketing agency or if you're doing any marketing, you just want results. That's what it's all about, right? Now, marketing's a bit like the universe. If you think about, this is a picture of the solar system. So you've got, all this kind of activity going on. What we know about the solar system, we can predict the next time there's going to be a solar eclipse. We know the next time Halley's Comet's coming around. We know how many times we're going to go around the sun. We know the next time the moon's going to rotate around the earth. We know all this activity, but outside of the universe, we know outside of the solar system, there's very little that we actually know, and we continue to learn. And digital marketing is actually very similar to that. So this is our model, Solar 7. Now, I'd like to say it was called Solar 7 by design, but it wasn't. We stumbled across it accidentally looking like a solar system, and there's 7 stages, so it became Solar 7. This came about over a lot of years of me very frustrated, just kind of trying to sketch out in front of clients, this is kind of the way that you want to do things. And this might be like iteration number 10 or something. One day I sketched it out and one of my team said, oh, it looks like a solar system. And that's what it became. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, the right way to approach your marketing. There's a process and the kind of things that you should be considering when you're kind of going through the marketing. So, discovery. The first stage is discovery. It's all about understanding where you've been as an organization, where you are now, and where it is that you want to go. Now, the kind of things that you want to kind of look at when you're doing that. First things first, you want to lock yourself away in a room with the relevant people, your directors, your team or whoever, and the kind of things that you want to be looking at is your past marketing and the results achieved. Now, sometimes people say to us, oh no, we don't do any marketing. We often sit down here and get on the whiteboard and people say, I'll say, what kind of marketing have you done? And they'll say, we don't do any marketing. Well, that's not true at all, because everyone here right now, we're all marketing. We're here, we're present, our personal brand, we're talking to each other, and that is by far one of the most powerful forms of marketing. So you need to look at the past marketing and the results achieved. You need to look at what you're doing right now and the results you're getting, and you need to look at where it is that you want to go in 12 months. Now, I've put 12 months there, but the reality is you want to look at 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, 5 years, and so on and so on. But to keep it nice and bite-sized, just think about the next 12 months, what you want to achieve in the next 12 months. Very important one, who your customers are. If you're saying, oh, I can work with absolutely anybody, you're being all things to everyone. You need to define the type of people that you actually want to work with. Yeah, fair enough, there might be other people that don't fit into those categories, but you want to be defining who they are, because at least that way you're laser focused on the right kind of customer. And of course, you need to know who your competitors are. If you don't know what they're doing, then you're missing the mark, really. So they're the kind of things that you need to be looking at in the discovery stage. Another thing that you need to be doing is carrying out what we call a SWOT analysis. It's a really simple thing. Just think of 4 lists. List your strengths, list your weaknesses, list the opportunities to your business, list the threats to your business. It's a really simple thing to do. But when you're looking at it, the key things that you need to factor in is your strengths and weaknesses are internal to the business, and the opportunities and threats are the external things that you can't control. These are the things you can control. These are the things opportunities you can control because it's what you're doing and getting out there. But the threats are something that you can't control. But it's really important to be aware of these things, because if you're not, especially with threats, if you don't see the hurdles coming, then that's the kind of thing that can take you out. Let's talk about hurdles. The thing that we see most commonly with a SWOT analysis is people not being honest with themselves. Oh, we're really strong at these things. Oh, we don't have any weaknesses. Oh, there's no threats to our business. We're brilliant. You need to be honest with yourself. You need to look at it from a helicopter view. The connection not being made. In other words, a strength and an opportunity needs to be taken advantage of. If you're strong in a certain area and you see an opportunity to move into, say, a new market, then take that strength, put it in that new market and do something with it. Just going through the process of, doing a SWOT analysis, it isn't enough. You need to action it. That's the biggest thing we see when people put their own little marketing plans or business plans or strategies together, not actually doing anything with it. And your strengths, focusing on the value offered rather than the feature. For us, we talk about ROI, return on investment. That's the value offered. We could say we make really pretty websites and we do really nice branding, and we can put amazing strategies together, but it's the outcome, it's the value that your customer is getting that you really need to be focusing on. The other thing, when you're setting, I talked about putting a plan together for the next 12 months, setting your objectives. Your objectives need to be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed. A great example of that is, rather than saying, right, well, next year we want to grow and we want to make loads of money. That's pretty vague. What you want to be saying is, we want to increase our turnover by X%. We want to be looking at our net profit increasing to this much in the 12-month period, or we want to increase our staff to this many number of people, so we've got this much resource to deliver that to have a turnover. Get specific, and once you've got those specifics down, that's the kind of thing that's going to help you achieve it, because you're actually going to have to think about the real specifics of it all. So what kind of hurdles do we see on that? People not being tough on themselves, setting the bar too low. What I would say is, set the bar high, guys. Obviously be realistic with it, but set it higher. You may not get it. We've had a fantastic year this year. We had targets, we didn't hit them, but because we had high targets, we've had a record year. And it's like, set the targets. Be tough on yourselves. Not thinking objectives through thoroughly enough. So obviously you might say, yeah, this time next year we'll be millionaires, but if you're only turning over 50k, for that to actually happen, you've got to be realistic. You've got to be realistic on what it is that you can actually achieve with the resource you have available. And resource isn't just money, it isn't just people, it's time as well. That's the most valuable resource that we all possess. And not keeping your objectives in clear sight. It's great. It's usually around this time of year people are putting their objectives in place and saying, right, great, in January we're going to take over the world. Come February or March, if you ask the team, what your objectives, people just forget, because it's gone. That's it. You get bogged down with all kinds of other things that are going on. So I'll give you an example. We had a client, 35 Devonshire Place they're called. They were a dental practice on Harley Street. This was about 5 or 6 years ago now that we worked with them. There were 3 of them who were the directors, and they were all dentists by trade. So the whole business function and marketing wasn't really their thing. So we went down, myself and Simon, who's not here today. We went down and we sat in their actually it wasn't a meeting room. It was a dental. It was the dentist chair, his dental chair there and whatnot, and we're just kind of having this meeting, got them to switch off the phones, and we went through and had a discussion with them about all the key things within the business. And it was interesting to see all these 3 different directors were in some cases actually giving different answers on some of the stuff that I talked about in the prompts. So just having that discussion and having an open discussion is quite an important thing. So we helped them gain a cohesive understanding of their marketing. And just to prove it, if you don't believe me, they're Simon in a dentist chair. I made him take that. I was like, come on, get it. It was while they went down to get some tea or something. I was like, give us a thumbs up picture. He'll thank me for that. He's not here today. Anyway, discovery. So the next stage after discovery is creating the strategy. The strategy captures all activity that needs to take place in order for you to achieve your goals. And the kind of things that you want to be looking at as a part of the strategy is, we talked about customer research, so really understanding who the customers are and maybe categorizing them into 4 key types of person. Now you might say, I've got way more than 4 customers, but if you can categorize them, give them a name, understand what their pain points are, know what kind of media they consume, because a 60-year-old male is going to consume different media to a 35-year-old female, and they're going to respond to different messages, they're going to have different pain points, they're going to be at different stages in their lives, different demographics. So understanding your customers, and then understanding your competitors as well. What kind of marketing are they doing? What's their social media like? Where do they rank on Google? What kind of gaps are you seeing? This is a really broad overview list, but just have a look at what kind of marketing they're doing. It's all out there. If they're doing it well, you'll see what marketing, or if they're doing any at all or none at all, you'll see it or won't see it. And that's where you want to gauge yourself on, right, okay, I like what they're doing. Let's have a look at that. Let's do a little bit more of that. I think they're doing a terrible job of that, so we'll do a bit of this instead. So the outcome from a strategy it should be something like this. This is just what we call a sample roadmap. In December you need to do this, in January you need to do that, and February, March, and so on and so on. The red stuff we outline is critical activity, really important. The green stuff is more than nice to have. Now, you don't need, it's not rocket science. You don't need to be, have a PhD in anything to create something like this. It's a plan. And, if you're doing something like this yourselves, you might find, all right, well, okay, this hasn't worked. You might come back to it in 3 months' time and then kind of rejig it and work at it again. With the way that we work with clients, it happens in exactly the same way. Because when we'll do a lot of homework, put a detailed plan together of everything that needs to happen. But the reality is, in 3 months' time, things might change. No business operates in a vacuum environment. There's always something external. If you think about the SWOT that I was talking about, there's always something external that's going to change the way that business happens. Think about COVID. In January 2020, we were all probably just toddling along thinking, that thing in China, it's not going to come here. Come the end of March 2020, we were all like, And the number of strategies that, we all had to pivot, I hate to use the word, but we all had to move and change in some kind of way. So it's just constantly looking at what it is that you're doing and just readjusting and moving the pieces around. Hurdles encountered, creating a strategy that has no action points or too many action points. So you can do your homework, but if you're not going to pull something out of it, what's the point? Make it manageable. 3 core priorities in 3 months, 3 and 3. So the stuff I've been talking about and just showing you might think, bloody hell, that's a little bit overwhelming. Just break it down. What are the 3 critical things that you need to do? That's the direction that you want to be going in. So the next stage is your brand and content. So that's at the heart of the model. Your brand is so much more than just a logo. It's how your brand makes people feel. It's what they read, it's where they see it. It's all about the positioning. It's not just a logo. So I'll give you an example. So we worked with a client, a business called Pinder Cooling. They do air conditioning fit out. Mainly kind of like in the Yorkshire and North England areas. So the visual brand, this is what it looked like when they came to us in early 2020. To me, that looks like something that should be on a American football shirt, that kind of thing. And Andrew Pinder, who's the MD, he came to us saying, right, we need some lead generation, we want to do some SEO and some pay-per-click marketing. And I said, great, but firstly, your branding is terrible and your website's terrible. We can generate all kinds of traffic to it, but if the brand ain't right and the website ain't right, it means absolutely nothing. So we went through a full exercise of rebranding them, and it was a lot of work on looking at their customer base and their competitors. And we came up with this as a concept with your heat map behind, and it was just something that was just a lot tidier and cleaner. We came up with concepts of doing a van wrap, and they loved it so much they got the van wrapped. They've got it all obviously all over the Viz vest and stuff like that. But the reason I'm showing you this is not just to say, hey, look how brilliant we are. It was something that we did, and it took a while for him to recognise that. He thought, I was just trying to sell to him. But it took a while for him to recognise that actually, this is an important thing, because when we look at it from a Solar 7 perspective, it's a fundamental part, the visual element of it, but not just the visual element, the words and the brand voice, which I'll talk about in a second, was really important. So when people are at the branding stage, the kind of hurdles that we see them encounter is not focusing on brand voice. What is brand voice? We've all got our own tone. We all speak in a certain way, and how we speak is how people perceive us and kind of, they decide whether they like you or dislike you or whatever there is in between. Your business, imagine your brand as its own entity, whether you have your own business or not, whether you have a team of 1,000. The brand, imagine it as its own human being, and the brand has to have its own written tone of voice. It has to have a style in the way that it communicates, just as I do and just as all you guys do as individuals. And that tone of voice needs to speak to the audience in a certain way. So if you think of any communication, say from Virgin, if you see any Virgin adverts, they're always really quite playful and it's very Richard Branson really, if you think about it. But if you think on the flip side, if you're being communicated to, say, by solicitors, the kind of language that they're going to use is very different. It tends to traditionally not be very human from solicitors, but they kind of get in there because they recognise that brand voice is such an important part. We're all human, so that's a really fundamental thing that people miss out, I find. Not knowing your audience and competition well enough. I feel like I've laboured that point a fair bit, but you get the point. Audience and competition, if you don't know them, your marketing's out. And not being consistent across all platforms with your brand. The number of times we see, a slight variant of a logo on your website, and then it's a bit different on your social media, and someone's done a different version of it on the vans. That consistency, that professionalism is something that's just going to come across when subconsciously it'll come across when you just see it kind of nice and uniform across all platforms. So moving on to stage 4, the website. So that's like the sun in this solar marketing system. That's the thing that everything, you want to draw people to your website. What is a website? It's a platform to execute your call to action. What is a call to action? It's a button. So this is Pinder Cooling's website. It's the button. The next thing you want to do, get a quote or click on our services or read more about Nano. You might think this is a very basic, simple website, but it was very carefully put together in the way because it needs to be a lead generation tool. So we started, apparently BMW will design their cars, they start with the cockpit and then they design everything around it because it's meant to be the ultimate driving experience. It's all about the driver. I like to liken web design like that. We always start with what is the next action we want people to do. So just imagine a blank screen and we just put the calls to action and then we build the website around that, because that's the thing you want people to do. They're not just going to go in and contact you straight away unless they've already been to your site a few times. What was the outcome from that? Immediately, without even doing any marketing, we were getting feedback from the client because the website and the branding looked so much more professional. When people were finding them, they were saying, oh, actually your site looked pretty good, so we'd like to have a chat with you. So just the visual element of it is just so important before there was any marketing that had been put behind it. What kind of hurdles do we see people encounter? When a website doesn't become a tool to generate inquiries or deliver a call to action, it just looks pretty and that's it. The thinking has to be there and their call to action, fundamental words. When you don't get a balance between the content and the design, sometimes you might have the prettiest, swishiest website going and it says absolutely nothing. It just looks good, but it's got no personality to it. The flip side, if you will have all been to a website where it's just got a million words on it and it's just a big wall of text. You're disengaged with it. It might rank number 1 on Google, but you'll go to it and you'll think, what is this? It's so easy to click on the back button and disappear somewhere else. So getting that balance right is a really important part. And thinking everyone has your user habits. Oh no, I'd click on that thing. So that's what I think people would do. There's 3 types of content consumers: skimmers, swimmers, and divers. Yeah, so hopefully it's self-explanatory. Skimmers are just the people that glance over it. The divers are the ones who look at every last bit of detail, and the swimmer is the person in between. Personally, I'm a skimmer. I'm just not into the detail unless when I get closer and closer to buying something. If I'm buying a new TV or a car or something, I'll skim it. When I want to get into the detail, that's when I'm really getting in. So the way that the content on your website needs to be broken out in chunks, so it categorized, so it's based around all these 3 different types of user. So that's your website. That's stage 4. Stage 5 is your planets. So these are different ways that you're going to generate traffic to your website. So PR, getting to the top of Google, social media, email, and advertising. This is a generic model, so it's not limited to just this. Like I was saying, we're all here networking. Networking could be one of the planets here as well. On average in a day, you see between 3,000 and 25,000 marketing messages a day. If you think of the room that we're sat in right now, there's obviously lots of Xpand branding going on. We've got Stranger Things, Pulp Fiction, Samsung, whatever's on your watch, Apple. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. You have to have touched base with a brand 7 times, have a need or a want for it. Then you're going to take action. Then you're going to decide, right, I'm going to make that inquiry. So what you need to do is make sure you're present across as many platforms as possible that are relevant to your target audience. Now, the orange ring around each one of these is content. As content is at the heart of the model, content is also really important to each one of these channels. You could be posting on social media all day, every day, and saying absolutely nothing. If it isn't the right kind of content for your target audience, then it means nothing. So that's why, again, at the early stages, it's so important to know your audience. Back to our friend Pinder Cooling. So for these guys, what did we do? We did PR, search marketing, social media, and a bit of email marketing for them. The outcome from that was £290,000 worth of quotes sent in 2021, directly generated from the marketing activity. Now again, this isn't just to say, hey, look how brilliant we are kind of thing. It's about just being aware of a series of activities. You don't just have one touch point with a brand. You know, it's all about measuring the things that are happening and making sure that you're present across the right kinds of channels. How do we know this? Oh, actually, sorry, here's another result. Xtool Europe, these guys do car diagnostic tools. You plug it into the car and it'll tell you what's wrong with it. Probably our best result to date, really. 100 to 1 return on investment through an email marketing campaign, which is also supported by PR and advertising. So basically, these guys got £40,000 worth of turnover in 48 hours from a £400 campaign spend. Now, that didn't happen. The reason I've said here, supported by PR and advertising, is because it was a build-up of activity over a period of time. So it isn't just about doing that one thing and that's it, you just suddenly get 40K's worth of work. And the number of people that say to me, oh wow, can you do the same for us? I'll say no, because I've worked with this guy for years, because marketing isn't just something that you can just suddenly switch on and it all of a sudden just comes to life. So we're talking about the planets now, stage 5. What kind of hurdles do we encounter? We have people coming to us and their expectations are just too high. It's like, oh wow, you achieved this result as a case on your website. Can you do that for us and can we have it by next week, please? I'm not Mystic Meg. You know, I don't have a crystal ball. We can't predict what's going to happen in the future. We have to put the components together, and you know, it's about managing expectations. You know, and marketing is sometimes it's seen as this magical thing that's just going to resolve everything, but it's a function that kind of needs to be joined up with every other part of the business. Knowing the difference between brand building and direct action mechanisms. What the hell does that mean? Brand building is getting your name out there through all these different planets that I talked about. A direct action mechanism is like pay-per-click marketing. It's immediately there, you go in, buy now, boom, that's it. Brand building is so important. Even if you're appearing at the top of Google and no one's ever heard of you, and you click on the back button, you go to another website where they think that they might have heard of you, that's the one that is likely to get the inquiry. So it's all about building the brand. Focusing too heavily on vanity figures, on social media, impressions, reach, followers that are not your target audience. These figures are there. It's good to measure these kind of things, but you really need to, be looking at the bigger picture. Vanity figures. We could do a social media campaign and get 1 million impressions, but if it doesn't turn into anything that connects with the objectives and actual return on investment, it means nothing. And not using enough channels to complement each other. You can't just be in one place and expect magical results. So stage 6 is reviewing and measuring activity. So you've got your brand, you've got your website, you've got your strategy at stage 2, you're doing all this activity. You need to know what's working, right? So going back to 35 Devonshire Place, great example here. So these guys, we ended up working with the website they already had, and we started doing pay-per-click marketing, paid advertising. We were generating traffic to the site, but there was nothing coming through. They weren't getting anything, and they said, Jag, what's going on here? So what we did was we said, before making any changes, we sat on it for a month or two to understand, because we hadn't built the site and we acquired the Google Ads. We had to understand what was going on. So by looking at the Google Analytics, we could actually see where the blockage was. The traffic was coming in, but the inquiries weren't happening because the way that the website was laid out just wasn't laid out right. It wasn't giving the right kind of information. So what we did was we created a dedicated landing page with the right kind of anatomy, with the right calls to action, so that it actually, it started trickling the inquiries through and the blockage was cleared. It's all about reviewing the activity. So what I would say is, there's a famous saying, if you can measure it, you can manage it. Measurement is something that we see not a lot of things happening. You need to know, you measure the right kind of thing. So with this, the kind of hurdles encountered, not measuring the right key performance indicators, so just making sure you're measuring the right stuff. Inconsistent measurement, you look at it today and then you look at it again in 6 months, and you look at it in a month's time, and you look at it again in 7 months. You need to keep track on it on a regular basis, and of course, not measuring it all. That's the worst one. So Yeah, that's the important one. And then finally, guys, return on investment, stage 7. Now, going back to Xtool Europe, 100 to 1 ROI. So for every quid that they spent on their marketing, they got 100 quid back. Pretty damn good, right? So £40,000 worth of sales from a £400 email campaign. And like I say, people frequently say, if I give you 400 quid, will you make me 40 grand in 48 hours? And I'll say, no. In fact, no, I don't say that. I say, yeah, right. Because it's just not going to happen. We worked with this client for years, and it was a very defined data list that we'd actually put together. The fundamental thing is that I'd really like to kind of get across is marketing isn't an emergency service. I wrote an article about this that went out on Prolific North, which is an industry publication. It got real good traction within our industry, because it's the kind of thing where people all of a sudden you're struggling. It's like, right, we need to do some marketing. Let's throw some money at it and expect results in 3 months. That's not how it happens. Marketing is a thing that you just need to chip away at, just nice and consistently. And just that's where the real brand building comes in, and that's where the real magic happens. So what I would say, guys, is go forward and build your brand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? No?
With a looming recession then,
Yep.
would you say market more?
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. I mean, you've got to look at efficiencies. That's an important thing. So again, if you think of stage 6, review and measure, you've got to look at what's working and what isn't working. But the classic case study is during the credit crunch, 08 I think it was, Burger King cut back on their marketing. McDonald's ramped it up, and they came out the stronger player at the end of it. So you absolutely just need to be putting yourself out there. By all means, you need to be looking at your cost efficiencies and looking at your suppliers and the kind of things that are happening. The worst thing you can do during a recession is cut back. You need to be kind of really keeping yourself out there, and the credit crunch in 08 proved that. It was the ones that continued marketing, they were the ones that survived.
Awesome.
Great. All right.